Guess I can turn down this computer audio. There we go.
Commissioners, the meeting recording is now live.
Thank you. Jennifer, Mr. Chair, you should be ready to go at the top of the hour.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it looks like it's 9 o'clock, and before we get started, I'll read the pre-meeting script, so bear with me. Welcome to the July 2nd, 2020 meeting of the Riverfront Design Committee meeting. This meeting is being held by video conference. My name is Scott Howard, and I'm the chair of the committee. As you are aware, during the state of emergency in place during the COVID-19 pandemic, no physical location will be provided for the Riverfront Design Committee meeting. The meeting will instead be live streamed from remote locations. We want to request that everyone joining us today, except committee members, keep your mic and phone muted until you are called on to speak. As instructed in the agenda, those who called in or emailed us in advance to let us know your name, contact number, and agenda item you wish to speak about will be recognized first. Before the RDC votes on each item, I will ask if any members of the public wish to speak. Anyone speaking will be given 3 minutes to speak. Since you are muted, when I call on you, please unmute yourself. On a phone, you will press *6 and then state your name and address for the record before you speak. On a desktop or laptop, you will hover your cursor over the microphone icon to remove the diagonal red line. If we lose our connection for this meeting, the meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once the connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored within 30 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be continued to the next regularly scheduled Riverfront Design Committee meeting on Thursday, August 6th, 2020 at 9 a.m. by video conference. The agenda and documents are located at https://agenda.okc.gov/sirepub/meet.aspx. You would then select view on the left side of the Riverfront Design Committee meeting to see all of the agenda items. Jennifer, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee Member Howard.
Present.
Committee Member Postick.
Present.
Committee Member Dean. Committee Member Dougherty. Committee Member Housel.
Present.
Committee Member Joyce.
Present.
Committee Member Larson.
Present.
Committee Member Templeton.
Present.
Committee Member Torres. Mr. Chair, you have quorum.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Item 2, approval of minutes. Chair would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes from last month's meeting. This is Commissioner John Postick.
I'll second. Ms. Heisel.
Okay, looks like it's coming up on the screen.
I'm still not on, this is John Joyce. I'm still not on private guide, so I vote to approve.
Okay. Motion to approve the minutes is passed. Item 3, cases withdrawn. There are none. Item 4, continuance requests. There are none. Item 5, consent docket. There are none. Item 6A, cases for individual consideration. It's SR-19-00014, parentheses R1, at 1100 South Robinson Avenue. Laura?
Before I get started, I believe Committee Member Joyce has something to say.
Yeah, I have a conflict with this first item and will be abstaining from participating as a committee member and voting on this item.
Okay, thank you, John.
Thank you. This is Laura Griggs, Planning Department. This is a request for a revision to a project that most, if not all of you, saw last year. The revised items are outlined in the staff report. I would point out probably the biggest three would be eliminating the second story of the main building at the corner. They're eliminating the vestibule building, and then they're eliminating the garage building. So in your packet, I included the approval that you did last year, all of the documents for that approval, and the verbiage for that approval, as well as the proposed documents. So the history of this project, you might recall, the building has been there quite some time, and it sustained some damage in some extremely high winds last year, resulting in bricks falling off the second floor, and the can't remember if it was building or fire department requesting or actually directing that the building be made safe. And so at that notice, the property owners removed the second story of bricks, which stopped the fall of bricks down onto the adjacent street and the sidewalk and made it safe. I indicated in some history in here, as well as this item was on council agenda and was actually deemed dilapidated by council. However, I have confirmed with code enforcement that they work with all property owners to either fix the structures or demolish them. And so they don't always immediately act on the declaration of dilapidation. And I talked to code enforcement just a couple of days ago. So they have been in conversation with the owner, and they are aware that she is working on plans, continuing to work on plans to rebuild the structure. So in the staff report, there's really only one item that I had a concern with, which deals with the minimum height of structures in DTD2 zoning. So this area is in not only Scenic River, but it's also in the downtown zoning. So you have to use both sets of design guidelines. So the minimum height in DTD2 is 2 stories. The original structure was 2 stories, and the original approval was to rebuild it to 2 stories. And staff is concerned that setting the tone for a 1-story structure at this prominent corner location across from the lower park would be setting a bad precedent. We're excited that this structure is going to get renovated, that this site is going to get renovated, and hopefully it will set the tone for what's going to happen on the rest of this side of Hubcap Alley in conjunction with the lower park, which you approved recently, which is immediately across the street. So the next slide that Cameron is going to, so I will say that all of the red is the clouds that I put on as staff, because there were no clouds showing the changes to the document. And so as you can see here, the building originally was going to have a vestibule building on the east side, and then the garage building. There was going to be a patio, and it was going to be eliminated, so that open area will still remain open. And there's just one street tree that was being eliminated. Cameron, you can go on to the next one. And so then literally, the revision to eliminate construction of the second story affects all the facades of the main building. They're adding some exterior lighting. They're adding metal awnings over the all the windows down the west facade, which is the Robinson Street facade. There were some revisions. A door was added on the east facade, which is where the another addition had been proposed, so they had to add a door there. One thing I will say is that I'm excited to see that it was going back with brick. You might recall the last approval was not for rebuilding of brick. It was going to be some limestone-like material that was going on the outside. The original structure is brick, and so that aspect of this revision I am supportive of. The issue with me still remains the regulation for 2 stories. And so Cameron, you can go on to the next slide, which is the sections. Go on to the next one because I'm trying to, and I think there's one more. And so then the 1-story building, it's just I read it was just a garage door change, which I have no issue with. That building is going to be pretty much as it is existing, and that's an accessory building to the main building. So Cameron, if you will go back, I know you told me I'm supposed to tell you which slide. I'm sorry. To the first one of these, so we can have that one up. And let me get to that. Which is slide 32, please. So as I stated, at this prominent location, staff is extremely concerned about supporting a 1-story structure. And allowing the building to be permanently reduced to 1 story is not in keeping with the intent of the minimum height regulations. It is for this reason that staff recommends denial of the height reduction and continuing the rest of the project to allow redesign of the corner building to a minimum of 2 stories or 30 feet in height. So by way of explanation of that is someone could have a 30-foot tall building and it only be 1 story, and that is allowed. Or someone could have a 20-story building and it's two actual stories in it, and that's allowed because it's an or in there. So staff recommendation, the first is to deny case item 1F, main building corner, revised project to eliminate construction of 2nd story. The second is continue the rest of the case items to the September 3rd meeting. And the reason I'm recommending September 3rd is, as you know, if we continue it to the next meeting, I have to have everything in by next Tuesday, and that is really not very much time for somebody to be able to do any type of redesign. And that is so that the applicant has the opportunity to redesign the main building to be a minimum of 2 stories or 30 feet in height. And the third would be to provide a recommendation of denial to the Board of Adjustment for a variance from the minimum height requirement of 2 stories or 30 feet on all street frontages. Currently, I don't believe the applicant has filed a variance application yet, but in anticipation of her filing one, we do need to get that last vote in on the record if the committee makes that decision that they support that. And do you have any, the applicant is on the call, and does the committee have any questions for me?
I have a question. This is Barbara Larson. So I'm reading through the staff report and I see that City Council has declared it dilapidated for demolition. So can can this keep coming in front of us until such time that the building falls down or it does get demolished?
The city council action is independent. Let me reverse that. Your action is independent of city council action. That's why I checked with code enforcement to confirm, it is their practice to work with the property owners. At this point, they are having conversations with the applicant. They know she's working on designs for the building. I'm not sure what type of time clock is ticking from that perspective. And if legal has any additional information to add, please speak up, Laura. But it is my understanding that they will work with the property owner as long as possible, so that in the interests of both the city and the property owner are realized.
So this can go on for a while.
It could.
This is John Postic. Could we get a brief explanation from the applicant as to why the second story was removed after it was previously approved by this committee?
I guess the chair, I guess you're finished asking me questions, and so the applicant can make her presentation and answer questions. Is that what I'm hearing, Mr. Chair?
Yes, unless there's any further questions, I'm sure there may be, but let's, Vicki, would you like to speak?
Yes. Am I okay to speak?
Yes.
Okay, this is Vicki Van Stavern at 601 Hollowdale in Edmond. And thank you for your question. Actually, the reason that I'm back with this rendition is because unfortunately we've determined that building a second floor onto this building is just not economically feasible. We've crunched the numbers everywhere we can, but the amount of leasable space does not offset the cost of adding a stair tower, stairs, an elevator, a fire suppression system. I went through several months with a contractor on this. He suggested we change from steel to wood. Went through a considerable redesign to try to get it in budget. The estimates were coming a little over twice what the maximum amount to make this work out economically could be. And then the pandemic hit, and I changed contractors to someone who does residential work and commercial, thinking maybe with a different set of subs, they could get this closer to where it needed to be. And as my contractor kept saying, Vicki, you have a problem. The numbers don't. So in light of the pandemic and the fact that brick and mortar retail may be dead or dying, and there's going to be a glut of office space, I decided what I needed to do, because as one of your members mentioned, we don't on forever. We want to move on this. That I needed to restore the two buildings that are there, make them really nice. It was originally a one-story building. That's why there is no room for a stair. All of that has to be added to the outside. And I would like John, if he would, to please talk about the structure of this building.
So, can you hear me, Mr. Chair?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, John.
Okay, good. Yeah, my name's John Joyce, 832 Northwest 40th, Oklahoma City. I've been a structural engineer here in town since 1985. I've looked at a lot of old buildings. And the first time I looked at this one, I was really kind of confused with what I saw on the inside. And what that finally has become crystal clear in my mind is that this was originally a single-story building. The reason I know that is because there's all this concrete structure on the inside, and then they've added steel columns in a way that you typically would not do even today, and certainly not at the time the building was built. But really, even more than that, there's this concrete beam that runs through the building, and sticking a steel column in the middle doesn't really, it changes the stresses in that concrete beam, that existing concrete beam. Well, what's so clear now is also when you get up on the, what we originally thought was the second floor, what we now know is the original roof, there's a couple kind of humps of concrete they put there. Well, what they did was they sort of added on to that concrete beam up on top, which, you know, seems crazy, looks crazy, but I guess it kind of worked. And that way they were able to put in some steel that kind of compensated for the way that they radically changed the moments by adding the interior column. So
excuse me, Mr. Joyce. Cameron, can you go to slide 5 so people can see the top, those humps that Mr. Joyce is talking about?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So those concrete humps were added over those columns with the idea being that way we can add some reinforcing steel up there to compensate for the fact that we stuck those columns in. I think most everybody would agree, looking at that right there, that's not a typical way that you're going to build the second floor. And what they did was they put wood framing all around that to kind of compensate for that. So, and actually in our plan, when we were going with the second floor, you know, we were having to work around those things. So that's kind of my spiel with that. Then I just have a couple more comments, kind of just putting on my sort of citizen hat, is that if you look, even at this picture we're looking at right now, I'm just going to say that if this project is approved, it will be by far the nicest building for a very long stretch. That's a picture of you know, obviously before that additional brick was removed. But that building next door to it, for example, in this picture here, it doesn't look that bad, but when a little bit of brick fell over on it, it just totally destroyed that building. And Vicki had me go inside and look at it, and that thing it's really kind of a commercial shanty, I would describe it. And a lot of those buildings along there are like that. So I guess my final remark would just be, I feel like that as commissioners, there's sort of a balance that we have to achieve between what we would love to see in the future and what we have to live with today. And we all know our city's history of sometimes getting a little bit excited and tearing down buildings and with grand dreams of, you know, what's going to come. And then sometimes those dreams don't come and we think, well, I wonder if that was a smart thing to do. Well, in effect, by denying this application today, what the committee will be doing is demolishing this building, because there are no plans to go through with a, you know, the owner's not going to come up with an extra $1 million that's going to make economic sense to do what we would like to see happen here. So what's going to happen is that building is going to be torn down. The city's going to tear it down, and we're going to be left with an empty parking lot. And maybe 20 years from now, something really magnificent that we'll all love will be built there, but that's just not the reality of today. So with that, I'll just turn it back over to Vicki.
Thank you, John. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So as John said, those are our options. And we looked at a number of different things to try to make this work. One was, I thought, well, what if we built 4 stories there? And I had more square footage to average out the cost of that infrastructure to go vertical. And because this concrete structure is old and was never intended to be more than 1 story, that wasn't a viable option. I talked to the contractor about maybe going behind this front building and going vertically and doing maybe a 8 or 10 story, which we could still do in the future sometime. But the contractor, who was Lingo at the time, said that they are chasing a number of projects like that. The banks won't loan money for it because Oklahoma City just isn't there yet to support that kind of project. So we can either have a very nice, high quality, 1-story building that'll be considerably higher than you see here, because I made the parapet tall enough to do a rooftop garden. The roof structure is already there, the concrete is there, so the cost is really putting a facade back on the building. And we can make it very attractive. I think you can see that from the elevations, or we will tear it down. So if there are any other questions, I'd be glad to answer. I'd also want to say that the code for the Western Gateway is very clear that there is no minimum height restriction for a building. And I know that staff has said that they're applying Downtown Design District 2 to this, but the way I see the code, the way I read it is that the overlay takes precedence over the underlay. And of course, I'm not a code official, but I have contacted David Box to look at this for me to see, if we can come to an agreement on that.
I'm sorry, this is Laura Griggs. Laura McDivitt, could you speak to that, please?
Sure. So the issue of whether or not a variance is required for the minimum height is not really an issue for the Riverfront Design Committee. That would be an issue for the Board of Adjustment. And so either the applicant could pursue the variance request with a recommendation from the Riverfront Design Committee, or could appeal the interpretation of the code to the board separately.
Okay. Laura, I have a question for you from a planning standpoint. The existing buildings in that area, most, I would say they're all 1-story. Is that correct?
There is one 2-story building. It is the Coolest Rock building, tucked way back in behind some trees, down about 3 blocks, that I didn't even realize was back in there. It's down where everything is painted a bright yellow. But you are correct. There's only one other 2-story building.
Okay. Well, I can understand.
And if you recall what was on the other side of the street, they were all 1-story buildings that were torn down. Right.
Okay. So, from a planning standpoint, in urban densities, I can understand, you want a taller building along the street frontage, but I'm curious if you had or allowed 1-story buildings along Robinson, and you had taller buildings behind it, to where you've allowed more views. Is that to me, I think that provides more opportunities for more people to have views of the lower park. That's just a thought I had, but.
Well, at this point, what my job is to look at what we currently have on the books right now.
I understand.
And that is the information that I provided in the staff report.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question. This is Dana Templeton. Do we have any idea what year those walls were added on the 2nd floor?
I don't, Dana. The only historical picture that we have of this building looks like, from the cars, that it was probably in the 1950s. That 2nd floor was there at the time. And I think but the bottom of the building had already been drastically altered to put garage doors across the front that we see in that photo. And that was in the 1950s. So I would think the 2nd floor would have had to be done before that time.
Okay.
This is John Postic. Do we have an image of kind of a ground level view of what the facade looks like today instead of this aerial view?
Yes, hang on just a second.
That's helpful.
Okay.
And
There's
my
another one of
thinking.
Robinson. Cameron, can you go to, wait a minute. Sorry, I'm trying to find one that might be more helpful. Cameron, if you can go to the next slide. Oh, hang on a minute. Slide 7, sorry.
Yes,
And
no,
the reason for my question is that the applicant mentioned, as we discussed the last time this was before us, that the building was substantially altered in, I believe she said, the 1950s. In any case, it's what we see today is not the original architecture. Furthermore, with the second floor demolished, there's not really, and the back wall missing, there's not really much there today to be saved from a historical point of view, in my opinion. I don't think that it is worthwhile I'm speaking purely from my opinion. I don't think it's worthwhile to compromise the planning and urban design guidelines of this district, particularly along the park frontage, which is going to substantially change the economics and urban design character of this district once it's constructed, for the sake of what appears, in my opinion, to not be much of a building that's left.
Oh, can you repeat that, John? What was the point there?
I'm sorry. The point I was making was, it's my opinion that there's not much of a building left, and what is left is certainly not what was originally constructed, as the rear wall is missing and the north and west facades appear to have been substantially altered in, I believe, the applicants of the 1950s. So it's my opinion that it's not worth substantially compromising the urban design character of this area, particularly on the edge of the new Lower Scissortail Park, which will change the character and economics of this area for saving a building that doesn't appear to be much of a building left.
So you're saying that it's not worth us denying this because the design of it is not what's there now, and there's not really a precedent yet?
What I'm saying is, my opinion is that the application should be denied.
Based on the fact that the proposed design is so much different than what is there currently, that it was basically a new building.
I don't think I would disagree with that, though it wasn't my original point. My reasoning was that what is being proposed is very different than what the city has set forth in its development guidelines and zoning for this area. And so the reason that we are reviewing this application is because it is different than what the city has said it wants to see here. And so in evaluating the relative merits of this application to see if it's worthwhile disregarding what the city has said it wants to see developed here, it's my opinion that this building does not merit a variance from that.
If I may speak to that, the building as designed does exactly meet the guidelines of the Western Gateway, and it does exactly meet the guidelines of the development framework, which was adopted by the city of 2015. I think the issue is that it does not meet the minimum requirement for Downtown Design District 2, which is the underlay to the Western Gateway. And staff has interpreted that that more restrictive code be applied to this property as opposed to the Western Gateway regulations, which have no minimum height requirement. I also wanted to say that the east wall of the building is not missing. There was never a wall there. Those were garage doors. Originally, you drove in from the back of this building and there, yes. And so you see that railing system that's up above. That's the original roof, extends out over, creating an overhang. And then there was this metal rod system where garage doors would slide across there. And this is where cars would drive in. So it's not a missing wall. It's the original vehicular entrance to this building.
If I'm recalling correctly, the first time we saw this, I'm remembering that you pulled the DTD2 design of the downtown area into this corner of the building, and so I'd like to. I'll go back to double check that, but if that's what I recall, I'm confused as to why you're saying that DDT doesn't apply here for the height. So you were trying to pull it in and now you're trying to pull it out. And so I'm just a little confused by that.
Well, the requirements of the underlying zone do apply. And I did take everything into consideration in the original design of the building. But from the code, it says the underlying zoning of the property, which is DD2, designated by the regular zoning overlay district, which is Western Gateway, of this chapter shall continue to regulate the use and development of land unless expressly modified by this section, meaning this section that covers the scenic river overlay. So all I'm saying is that I think if you read the code, and I know that it's not your job to interpret code, and I understand that, but the whole reason for having the overlay is to make to have the character of these different areas be expressed separately as a part of downtown design too. And not that it has to be uniform throughout the whole thing, but that there are areas that are unique and have a history, and that reinforcing and paying homage to that is something that we would want to do.
Well, I completely understand what you're saying. And yes, I can read codes. My point is that the last time this came in front of us, we were having a discussion about whether or not we wanted the aesthetics of the building to mimic Automobile Alley and rather than the downtown. And if I recall correctly, you were pulling in design elements from some of the buildings in downtown. And so I think that we're doing a little flip-flop here by the design is per downtown, but we're not wanting to follow the downtown zoning. So that's my only comment.
I understand.
You can't pick and choose what you want to do and flip-flop between any regulation that you want.
I understand what you're saying and appreciate that. With all due respect, the downtown, the development framework and the codes say that if you have a multi-story building, that the first floor will have a different material than subsequent floors, and that there will be a horizontal delineation between those floors. That's gone now. You know, in this design, it's a 1-story building with brick all the way up, which is what staff had requested that I do in the first place, that did not meet the guidelines of the development framework. It's not just that I was using DD2, I was looking at all of the guidelines and trying to do the best that I could to make the original design and this one comply with what is requested.
This is Laura
I have a
McDevitt,
question.
Attorney's
Oh, go
office.
ahead.
Just to clarify things a little bit. Well, so what is before the Riverfront Design Committee today is the variance request, not whether the variance is required. So just so for purposes of limited discussion.
All right, this is Dana Templeton. To be more pragmatic about this, Vicki, is that the bottom line that if this doesn't get approved, then the city will be able to step in and demolish it, and again, it will become a blank lot, possibly a parking lot, as John Joyce mentioned. Is that our options at this point?
If we can't do a project that's economically viable, which is to restore these 2 buildings, then we will demolish the building. I mean, there's no reason to let the city do it because it's probably going to cost more that way. If we can't get this approved, yes, we are going to tear the building down.
Thank you.
Vicki, do you have an architect working with you on this?
Only as consulting. I have drawn the drawings.
Does the committee have any other additional questions for the applicant? Hearing none, are there any anybody from the public that would like to speak or ask questions?
This is John Joyce. I know that I visited with Vicki before the meeting, and I don't know. It's kind of like another option she would have would be to ask for a continuance, and I think that continuance would really be more so than redesign and add the second floor, to kind of seek additional legal counsel, to kind of dispute the staff recommendation, to maybe present more forceful arguments to the committee. So that's a possibility. I'm just throwing that out there.
And can I request the city attorney, could you speak to that? Because I'm not so sure the committee has that ability.
So the applicant could request a continuance, and then, if even with having consulted with an attorney, and if an attorney were to represent her with this application, still the issue for the Riverfront Design Committee would not be whether a variance is required. It would be whether or not it was recommended. If there is going to be any kind of appeal about how the code applies and whether there is a minimum height requirement here, that would be an issue not for the Riverfront Design Committee, but would be for the Board of Adjustment. That's an appeal from administrative decision of the planning director, which is a separate path than what we're currently on.
Well, then, if I may, I would like to ask for a continuance until we can sort through this other issue.
Okay.
And do we have a date so that we don't have to re-advertise? Or
Right, Laura, at your convenience.
Well, so let me look at something really quick. So if you're a continuance in anticipation of you filing an appeal with the Board of Adjustment, I wanted to try and do a logical time frame. So hang on just 1 second. I just wanted to pull up the Board of Adjustment calendars. So today is the deadline for the August 6th meeting. And July 17th, of course, and July 17th is the deadline for the August 20th meeting. So if we were to continue this to September, the September 3rd meeting, does that seem like a logical time frame to you, Vicki?
Yes.
Okay. So if the committee is supportive of the applicant's request for continuance, I recommend that you continue it to the meeting in September, which is September the 3rd.
Okay, thank you, Laura. The chair would entertain a motion.
I will make a
This is
motion that
John
we
Postic.
accept the applicant. Go ahead.
Please go ahead,
Postic.
Dana.
Okay, this is Dana Templeton. I would like to make a recommendation that the applicant's request for continuance be accepted.
Okay,
September 3rd.
to September 3rd.
To September 3rd.
Okay. Thank you, Dana. Do we have a second?
I will second that. This is Commissioner Postic.
Thank you, John. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote.
Happened.
Okay,
There it is.
the motion has been approved to continue to September 3rd.
Excuse me a minute. Barbara, we're not getting your vote. I noticed that on the minutes. So this particular one came up with a red X for your vote. And you're muted. Can you unmute yourself there?
That's because I denied it.
Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to confirm that because I saw that came up on the minutes. I wanted to make sure that I was looking at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go on to item 6B, SRCA-20-00012 at 316 South Blackwelder Avenue. Laura?
Mr. Joyce, did you have something to say?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I am re-entering the oval at this time and rejoining the meeting.
I forgot to pause and allow you to do that, so thank you for reminding.
Sure.
Okay. Laura, go ahead.
Okay, this is a request from Goodwill, and I will point out, go back to that slide, please, that you were just on, Cameron. And I will point out on the left of you there on the aerial, you see the red lines. This is a fencing area that's around the loading dock delivery area at the large Goodwill site. That's on South Reno. Their address is Blackwelder, but everybody knows it as being on South Reno. And due to damage to vehicles and break-ins, they are requesting that they be allowed to install an electric fence inside their current chain link fence. This is similar to other ones that you've seen in this area that I'll talk about here in a minute. And so in that picture, where you see the red lines is where they're proposing to put the electric fence, the 10-foot tall electric fence inside the chain link fence. In Scenic River, the issue is not the height. That height is allowed. The issue is with the material. And so this is coming before you because they're going to need to get a variance from the Board of Adjustment. So here's the front view when you pull down in there, and so you can see the existing chain link fence, and that's where the north installation would be. It'd be on the back side of that. And this fence is a 6 or 7 foot tall. Part of their fence is 6, part of it's 7, and it'd be 10 foot tall inside it. What I included in your packet was similar ones that you had, actually one in this area that you all had considered recently back in April. The underlying zoning district is I2. And so the electric fence is allowed. This is on the south part of that, where they have a gated entrance that you can get to from off of Southwest 3rd Street. So immediately south of this view, and we're going to see that here in a minute, is a fence that you all approved back in April that I have in the slides. I'm going to let Cameron get to there and then I'll tell him to stop. Just so you can see what it looks like. It's the bottom slide, but you can't see it very well. I have some close-ups coming up. So there, right there is one of the close-ups of the entrance, and that's off 3rd Street. Now, the main difference in the current proposal and the one that you approved here is the current proposal for Goodwill. It's not adjacent to the street at all. This particular one, which is on the south side of 3rd Street, and you can see it here, that is adjacent to the street. And the chain link fence was kept. And then if you can look in the lower right corner, you can kind of see where the angled part is on the chain link, where it already had the barbed wire. And then you can see the vertical that goes up, which goes up to the 10-foot height that has the horizontal wires. I did not ask the fence people, although they might know because they are on the call. I see Michael Pate there, but I don't know if they have any feedback. That is the solar component of that electric fence on the south side. I don't know if they've had any feedback from that customer they had on any impact on the theft they were having, and hopefully he might have that. And then this is one that is to the east a little bit, Blumenthal's over at Western, that the committee took action on 2 or 3 years ago. And it's harder to see this electric fence that's behind the chain link fence, probably because of the shelves behind with all the transmissions on it. But this is 2 locations in close proximity to Goodwill. It's in this neighborhood where they are having problems with theft and damage to property. And so staff feels that as we have in the past, and you can see on this drawing on where the red line is, that's where they're proposing to put the electric fence. That, as you saw in some of those pictures, the wire fades eventually over time. You probably won't see it. This isn't next to the road, so I don't think there'll be that issue with visibility from the traveling public on the roadways. More probably from the people that are pulling into Goodwill. Because this shot, I'm up on Reno, and yeah, I zoomed in a little bit because the building is set really far off of Reno. And in that area where it's going is where that red arrow is. And so staff is recommending approval with the condition that the applicant obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the fence material regulations. And then there's also a second motion that the committee needs to make with a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. And as I said, we have the fence person on the call, Mr. Pate. We also have Brian Alton, who is with Goodwill, on the call as well. So is there any questions for staff?
My question would be, this is John Joyce. How does this application differ from the ones we've already approved?
The only difference I would say, and Mr. Pate can add to or disagree with me, is the fact that in this picture you can see how far away it is from Reno. Down on Southwest 3rd Street, it is closer to the street, but immediately south, kind of where I have Southwest 3rd written in yellow, that's where that other electric fence is. So this is adjacent to the other one. So the only difference I see is the fact that the main roadway through here, the traveling public uses is South Reno, and it's set way off the road. And there's no way anybody's going to be able to see that from Reno.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. Are there any other questions for staff? Would the applicant like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, we agree with the staff's recommendation. I think you've all heard the primers before about how the electric fences operate, battery powered, pulsed electric, alarmed. So I'm not going to bore you with all that again, but if you do have any questions about the operations of the fence, or the location, I think what Laura was telling you about the location is true. You can't see this fence at all unless you're coming down Southwest 3rd. And then as usual, you got to look really hard to see it. But this is another property that we would like to secure to make sure that no one is breaking in there and damaging those vehicles and whatever else they're trying to steal over there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Are there any questions from the committee to the applicant? Are there any questions from the public that would like to speak? Okay, the chair would entertain a motion.
This is John Postic. I'd like to make a motion to approve the application.
Thank you, John. Do we have a second?
Second.
Dana Templeton.
Was that Dana? Was that you?
It wasn't me. It was also John. So I'll second the motion.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion to and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote.
So again, I'll have to kind of vote orally on this one. I vote in favor. This is John Joyce.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Okay, that motion passed. Now we need a second motion for the Board of Adjustment. Chair would entertain.
I'd like to make a, sorry, Scott. I'd like to make a motion to approve this application to the Board of Adjustment for a variance to the fence material regulations.
This is
This is
Barbara,
John.
second.
Thank you, Barbara. Any further discussion? We'll proceed with the vote.
This is John Joyce. I'd vote in favor of the motion.
Thank you, John. Motion passes.
And I also forgot to mention, I believe this is on this afternoon's Board of Adjustment agenda. And so I will pass that information along.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Mhm.
Item 7, other business, there is none. Item 8A, communications, administrative approval report. Anything, Laura?
This is Laura Griggs, Planning Department. The only thing I'll mention is you all received an amended agenda because I messed up. I had the right case number and address and the right attachments for number 1, but I had the wrong description because obviously they weren't tearing down a house at 800 River Sport Drive. So, so just for clarification purposes, that's why we had to do that amendment, and that is not a requirement. We just do that as a courtesy to report out all the administrative approvals. So just wanted to note that.
Okay, thank you. Item, well, hold on. Item 8B, comments from Planning Department staff.
Well, we're doing such a good job at this. We have a meeting next month. Crooked Oak School. So I'm glad somebody has bond issues that get approved and they are continuing to work. So we will have a meeting on August the 6th. So please check your calendars. I'll probably send out an early quorum call. I think we have three members absent this week, probably because people are trying to either do some staycations or get out of town for a bit because everybody needs a break about now. So, and hopefully your first fully digital packet worked well for everybody. I hadn't heard that anybody was having an issue. Good. In the interest of our budget and to try to cut down on our huge copying costs, we have been working towards that for quite some time. So, and we haven't heard otherwise. So I am anticipating we're going to have another Zoom meeting in August. They are still working on the council chambers. You might recall at the commission workshop, There was a presentation. They talked about all the changes they were going to make in the renovations to council chambers. And you're going to have totally different setups when we get there, with computers and everything. And part of that deals with PrimeGov, which you're now getting hopefully used to. And so you'll be old hat at it by the time we get back into a physical meeting environment. So thank you for being here today. And if you do have problems with digital packets, please let staff know, because we're trying to make it as easy as possible for you.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. Item 8C, comments from committee members. All right. Well, I'm glad to see everybody's doing okay. Item 8D, Laura mentioned the next meeting date is August 6th, 2020. And with that, I will call the meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Stay
you all.
safe.
Everybody have a good 4th.